Welcome, everybody, to this World Satsanga held on the 28th of February 2024 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Kevin Moore Show. And as usual, I encourage you to check out his podcast or his YouTube channel, The Kevin Moore Show, on YouTube, where he's looking at all the different ways in which we access the greater reality. In his show, they call us channelers. This month's lecture is about programming us. When we start our incarnation, we know everything about what we are, who we are, how we are connected to our true energetic self, higher self, Godhead or Oversoul, the source and the origin. We know all about our previous incarnations. We know all about the previous incarnations that our other aspects projected from our true energetic self have experienced. And we also know what our life plan is, what we want to experience as a function of this. We also know, because we've experienced it on a regular basis, what we are capable of when we're in the energetic. And so when we come into this incarnation, we come into it with a complete subconscious knowledge base of who and what we are and what we can achieve, and that there is in fact no, should we say, limitations to what we can do in any way, shape, or form. However, as a function of incarnation, we come right down the frequencies to those of the gross physical, which are the lowest frequencies associated with the multiverse. And as a result, our communicative bandwidth is dramatically reduced. Consider it like being able to communicate or being able to work things out in the world's fastest supercomputer times well over 1,000, and then trying to be able to communicate with that by the written word in a letter. And that's the difference in communicative bandwidth that we experience while we're incarnate here versus what we are able to experience and use on a regular basis when we're in the energetic, when we're not incarnate. So as we gradually become more and more connected to our incarnate vehicle, this biological robot body, if you want to call it that, that allows us to interact with the lowest frequencies of the multiverse in the way that we're supposed to by being part of it, we start to become body associated, because this communicative bandwidth is so low that we start to not be able to connect with it, although there's never any, should we say, detachment from ourselves and our higher self. But there are obviously significantly limited ways in which we can communicate. And so we start to become focused upon the body, and the body is what we are, and the body is what we feel we are. In the background, we still know in our subconscious that we're able to do many different things that we can't do in the physical, or that we believe we can't do. And what happens is we get programmed. We get programmed by our parents, we get programmed by our friends, we get programmed by our authority figures, teachers, leaders, politicians, scientists, doctors, lawyers, surveyors. All these different people that we hold as authority figures start to program us in terms of who and what we can do. So the ability to, for example, create something out of thin air by using our intention disappears, because nobody can do that, apparently. The ability to communicate through telepathy disappears, because nobody can do that, apparently. The ability to see beyond the visual range of the human eye disappears, because nobody can do that, apparently. And nobody can do it because everybody's been programmed that they can't do it. And so they start to not only believe that they can't do it, but their, shall we say, evidence suggests that they can't, because they have this disbelief associated with what they can do. And that disbelief reduces the frequency levels to the point where that which we could do, we can no longer do, because we no longer know that we can do it. And so we create a condition where we're programmed with everything. If we ignored that programming, if we ignored the fact that, for instance, if we put our hands into a fire, a wood fire or a coal fire, we didn't get our hands burnt, we wouldn't, because we would create an energy field around the hand that protected it. If we realized that we don't need to breathe air to be able to sustain the body, we could take energy from and through the chakras from the greater reality around us at these frequency levels, then we wouldn't need to breathe air. Same with eating, digesting and metabolizing physical food, plants, vegetables, animal meats, and fruits, and all the other different pieces, nuts, for example, and fungi. If we recognize that we can take energy from, again, through the chakras, through the greater reality, through prana, as the Hindus call it, and yogis call it, then we wouldn't need to eat to sustain the body. There are plenty of examples of those individuals who choose not to agree with this programming, this rhetoric, that we are incapable of doing that which is unavailable to most individuals, because they totally believe, and therefore it becomes a knowledge-based system, that they can't do it. There's yogis who manage to sustain their bodies for 400 plus years, even 1,000 years. There's yogis who can levitate. There's yogis who can teleport. They can bilocate. They can duplicate their bodies. They can recreate anything out of air, thin air, because air is energy, because they've been programmed in a different way. So if we consider that as Westerners, we're programmed into being limited, and then in more ancient times in India and in the Middle East, and even in South America and Middle America, where we got the native Indians, they were able to do things that we can't do now because they worked with nature. They were taught how to work with nature. They were taught how to work with the frequencies. They were taught how to connect. So they used to meditate, and shaman used to use another method, sometimes through dancing, sometimes through creating a body mantra by moving their bodies around, or creating other forms of specific focused response to distract them from the gross physical. They were able to detach from the gross physical, connect with the higher frequencies, and therefore realize who and what they were, and be able to interact with frequencies beyond what we can normally do in our programmed state, and start to work what we would classify as being miracles. Jesus was able to do this. The Buddha was able to do it. Muhammad was able to do it. It's just that the individuals, the human beings after them, not specifically directly after them, but maybe a number of generations after them, started to not be able to do these things because the frequencies changed, and so it was more difficult, because the lower the frequency, the more difficult it is to access these higher frequencies through meditation. But also those individuals who ended up being leaders in the particular thought process that these ascended masters were teaching us weren't able to experience it themselves before they ended up being teachers. So their teachers maybe couldn't put the information across to them in a way that they particularly could understand it. So our programming is based upon everything around us. And I can remember a long time ago when I was meditating as a young teenager, and telling my mother, Mother, I can see the wind. I can see it going up the side of the wall of my neighbour's house, over the guttering, over the tiles of the roof, and around the chimney. And I distinctly remember the response from my mother. She said to me, "Don't be so stupid. Nobody can see the wind." Well, the wind is only a short frequential distance above where we are now. It's not even in the astral levels. It's in between the gross physical and the astral. So it's in a sort of an area that we could classify as being the etheric. I mean, one could argue that the lower astral is the etheric, but once you start to move above the halfway point, you start to be able to perceive different things, not just with your physical eyes, but with your spiritual or third eye, which is usually located in a similar location, but not at the same frequency as the spiritual or third eye chakras, the center of the front of the forehead. So in receiving this information, we see it and we get told otherwise. People who, when they're young, see invisible friends. They see elementals. They see astral entities. They get told on a regular basis by their parents, by their friends, by the authority figures who can't tune into these frequencies, that it can't possibly exist because they can't see it. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means they can't see it, so it doesn't exist. Because they're an authority figure, we start to believe them. Think of it this way. Maybe 300 years ago, probably even less actually, we considered that the etheric, the ether, was spirit, was above that. Well, the frequencies of the etheric, of the ether, are only just above the highest of the frequencies that we would use for telecommunications, radio waves. Now, radio waves have only recently been discovered with the use of Morse code, etc. And John Logie Baird and Marconi and Edison all collectively together received information that allowed them to work out how to both transmit and receive these levels of information by creating electromagnetic disturbance, radio waves. And so, although it wasn't there in our visual range, it wasn't there in our audible range, we couldn't smell it, we couldn't taste it, we couldn't touch it, it didn't exist until we created the ability to detect it and use it by having some form of mechanism. Now, it stands to reason that when we become a higher frequency, we'll start to understand more. We'll start to be able to communicate via telepathy. We'll start to be able to teleport ourselves. We'll start to be able to make our bodies lighter and levitate by changing the density, by increasing the frequency, by changing the gap in between the molecules, the atoms, the leptons, which are the quarks, to levels of quanta down below the atoms, into a different state, and so we can move upwards. But again, right now, because we can't see anybody else doing it and nobody has experienced it themselves, it can't possibly happen. So we get this level of programming with everything. And this level of programming not only is associated with the spiritual world or the metaphysical world or the real world above the gross physical, which is so slow, it's like us being in concrete, in relatively speaking. We also get programmed by those around us, such as politicians and teachers, with misinformation and people who want to make fun of us by making us think different things that are incorrect or have little bits of truth in them just enough to attract us, but in actual fact are laced with untruths just to confuse us and make us go in a different direction. Because we believe these individuals, because they're authority figures or they're friends or they're somebody who we consider to be of a knowledgeable nature. So we're programmed all the way through our incarnation. But it's only when we decide not to accept these different levels of programming that we can start to move beyond. And the way to move beyond the physical and the programming associated with the physical, that we can't do this or we can't do that, or that can't possibly exist, or this is impossible, by doing meditation to raise our frequencies. You can also do the chakra opening exercises that are on the links in the about part of my website. All of these things help to raise our frequencies, start to increase our communicative bandwidth, and allow us to tap into the truth associated with the greater reality rather than the untruth associated with our programming, which is based upon being stuck in the lower frequencies of the multiverse, that which is called the physical universe, that which is like us trying to move through concrete. So reject as much as you can. Obviously, work with that which rings true, but reject that which is simply programmed because those who educate us don't know themselves. Go into a meditative regime. Try Kriya Yoga. Try to reverse in the frequencies. Try meditating in tree-lined avenues. Try doing things like Qi Kung. Try doing things that create a higher level of vibration within you, raising your frequencies, and you will start to connect with the greater reality or the entities in the multiverse and source, and you'll start to get information based upon the truth rather than that which has been programmed into us by individuals who we consider to be authority figures, but are actually only being programmed themselves by their authority figures, who are programmed themselves by their authority figures, and again and again and again. So it's time to reject that which is not specifically correct and work with what is and could be in the gross physical. Now it's time for the questions and answers. Well, welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 28th of February 2024. And the year is flying by. It is really flying by. It's quite amazing how quick the months are going. And I really feel that, as previously, we are experiencing what I can only suggest is that time is speeding up again, which is an indication that we are starting to bottom out of the frequencies and that there's better things to come in terms of how we think, behave, and act with everybody around us. So let's think high thoughts as we go through the questions. So I know there's some questions here which might be quite interesting as well. And these questions, these 5 here, are from Ulla. And before we go anywhere, Ulla's released a new book, her 7th book, which she's channeled herself, which is absolutely fantastic. So I suggest you type in her name on Amazon or Google and find out what the first 6 books are, big picture books, and what the 7th book is, which is one that she's channeled herself. So please go and seek out her new work. It's proving to be excellent. Okay, right, first question. Who are the other entities that have individualized free will in our universe beside the humans at between frequency levels 1 to 3? And what frequency levels and location in the universe? And what form factors are they? I don't actually know what the form factors are. I don't know where they are, but I do know there is one for every frequency level above the 3rd. So we have the first 3, which are composites, which create the gross physical. Then we have the 4th level, which is the lower astral, 5th, the upper lower astral, etc., etc. And then we go to the 12th. But every one of those levels above the 3rd also has, in my understanding, another, should we say, a form factor. I struggle to say the word civilization, but form factor that has the capability of having individualized free will. I don't know where they are. All I do know is they're not in the same galaxy. They're in other locations within the physical universe that I'm not being told about. To be honest, I've not asked the question, but I think if it was going to be given to me when I was asking the question, writing this current book I'm just about to finish, I would have been told. So I think that I might see if I can remember to ask the question where they are. But to answer a geo-universal question, when it's, it could be this galaxy, which is several thousand galaxies away from ours, won't actually mean a lot to us in human terms. So I don't think it matters. All we need to know is that the same experiment is happening on all of the frequency levels where we can exist in sort of frequential isolation. And that's part of the understanding, is that trying to understand at what level do we get the best level of accuracy in terms of evolutionary progression, the accrual of evolutionary content, at what particular frequency level. So it's being done on those other levels as well. So it's a good question. Thank you. Number 2, do our higher selves, or true energetic selves, or Godhead or Oversoul, in the evolutionary cycle have totally autonomous individualized free will at all levels of the multiverse from the source's point of view? It's interesting that the higher the volume of sentience we have, the more, shall we say, desire to conform to what is required of us. So although there's individualized free will experienced by our true energetic selves, that's because the sentience is more mature. Clearly, the larger the volume of sentience, the more collective experiential content is there, and collective evolutionary content is a function of projecting smaller aspects, the souls, of themselves into different locations and experiencing lots of different things. So they do have individualized free will, but they tend to be more compliant to the needs or the requirements of the source. So it's almost like a high level of self-policing. They don't do what humans do with individualized free will, which is totally abuse it. They use it in a really creative way to ensure that the possibility of experiencing, learning, and evolving on their level and on our level and our shards level is as evolutionary efficient as possible. Another part of this is, are they subject to any higher guidance when working alone or working as groups with other higher selves? yeah, as I just said, basically, it's just like a self-policing thing. A, a mature society self-polices. They always think about what they're going to do and how it's going to affect them, those in the location around them, and those who are very close to them, and how that could practically, spread out and affect everybody else later. There's an old saying, isn't there? When a butterfly beats its wings in another part of the world, a hurricane happens. It's the same. That's an expression of how things can spread very, very quickly in a much amplified way. So again, they look after themselves. Really, they understand what to do and how to do it, and how to think, behave, and act. Okay, next question. If so, are the lower level higher cells in full dimension 2 or 3 subject to more guidance than those that incarnate from frequency level 5 plus and higher? Who guides them? Source. Again, the level of evolution associated with the volume of sentience associated with the true energetic self is significant enough for them to be able to, again, self-police themselves, from the second full dimension upwards. I've not actually met anybody who's in the second full dimension. I have to say this. I start to realize that, start to think that maybe those are volumes of sentience or their true energetic selves are not of our level, not of our quality of sentience or density of sentience. So they would be like in the mineral location in terms of their evolution. But in terms of what they would do and how they would do it, they would be more compliant. So that's in terms of what's expected of them from the source. Okay, question 4. Are all white children going to be non-captive on beings? Are they rotating through the human incarnations as born-ins? We're born into a body, or walk-ins like Greta Thunberg, or both. So far, from memory, and if my memory is incorrect, you can tell me. I only know of one walk-in, and that's the Greta Thunberg soul. The rest of all are all born-ins. I don't know of any more. I remember I've known about 5 now. The rest I've not been able to. I've not been able to sense them. So they're not here yet. They're not on the earth. They're not incarnate yet. It doesn't mean they're not around us, but they're not incarnate yet. But my understanding is that they can be both a hybrid or very evolved aspect that is associated with the source. So they don't actually have to be at all. So it's going to be a case of whatever evolved sentience is up for the job and has the ability to project a smaller volume of sentience that will be able to work with the potential role that they've got is available. And what I'm seeing here is that most of them will have had a high level of experience in being a leader of some sort, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, or being in the background, a bit like Babaji, for instance. So they will have been experts in previous incarnations, and they'll use those expertise and they'll bring it into this incarnation to help them. But it's not necessary that they're of any sort. Okay. Next and last question from Villa. Then we've got loads here, which is good. There are many military exercises planned in March by NATO allies in Europe. How do we prevent Putin from starting a world war as a result? Right now, I'm getting the feeling, and I've had the feeling for a long time, that there's a lot of discussion and a lot of scenarios being discussed surrounding the way in which they can stop Putin and other individuals who are causing problems around the world. We're having the problem with Israel and Palestine as well, where it's been taken out of context totally. Although you could argue that everything is out of context if it's aggression or low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions. But right now, there's a significant level of resistance to get involved. So I'm seeing that the NATO exercises are really just a show of power. They're to say, look, we know you're doing what you're doing. We know you're having this this effect on the military population and the civilian population. Just look at what we could do if we wanted to. Look at the power we've got, and that's what they're doing. So they're trying to create a peaceful solution, although you could argue the peaceful solution hasn't been working recently at all. But they're trying to be more mature about it. They don't want to create another world war, but they're trying to use military might in a passive way to create a condition where there'll be a second thought process going on in the minds of those who are leading the more aggressive tendencies around the world, not just in the locations that we know of as well. Well, hope that helps. Thank you, Ola, for those questions. We've got some more questions now. Let's see if I can look at the chat. We've got 8 questions lined up. Let's go right to the top. Right, this is from Jade Joss. Is human sentience a greater mind on its own? No, human sentience as such is simply a volume of sentience, which is a component of the sentience associated with our true energetic cells. So, although it has capability of being really creative, it has the capability of overcoming the pre-programming and the constraints associated with the physical world. In terms of the lower frequencies stopping our communicative bandwidth and our ability to manipulate our environment. So it has that capability, and it is great in that sense, but it's not greater than any other sentience that incarnates into any other body at our quality of sentience level in any other location in the physical universe, with or without individualized free will. Okay. Next one. Does celibacy give any spiritual advantage? The reason for celibacy is not greatly known, and to be honest, in Western religions, it's totally misunderstood. In Eastern religions, certainly with yogis, it's fully understood, because celibacy was required so that the energies associated with the reproduction system, when in meditation, because they do arise, if you do Kriya Yoga, for example, there's a potential level of becoming aroused. So the thing is, with that, you can redirect the energy into the spine, and it goes up through the Shoshana and starts to create an energetic response within the plexuses that are part of the connectivity of the chakras with the rest of the body. So the celibacy side was to, again, create a condition where you'd try to use that energy for meditative purposes to expand your consciousness, to enable you to enter into samadhi or astral traveling. But it also functions as a way of removing, or should we say, detaching ourselves from that level of temptation, which is, again, being addicted to sex is another form of karma. So being celibate would be a spiritual advantage in that respect, yes. So number 3, in your book, The Curators, most of the entities stroke gods are from mythological stories. Are they still relevant and functioning? There are similar entities available in Hindu mythology as well, with different backstories. Are these Hindu, Greek, Egyptian gods, demigods, same vibration frequency with different stories? My understanding is these are levels of understanding of the hierarchy of the entities that support the physical universe and its ability to be maintained at a high level of evolutionary effectiveness, and also stories or remembrances of other civilizations on the earth as well. So a lot of the Hindu side, with the blue colored skin, the green colored skin, etc., and the multiple limbs, and maybe there's a mixture of human and animal bodies as well, are a function of remembering the types of things that we could do in the Atlantean period as well. There are some people who have quite large purple birthmarks. Those birthmarks aren't birthmarks as such. They're a genetic remembering of the color of skin we used to have in a couple of civilizations ago. So that's the sort of that's been passed down genetically rather than energetically. So the stories we have are based upon actual knowledge, which has been passed down and become legend, and all, from the perspective of understanding those entities who are looking after us, the elementals, etc., 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 and some of the imagery we used to have for powerful entities in the previous Atlantean civilization. Okay. Question 4. How long does it take for this pineal gland to develop in the newborn? Is the aspect of soul integration with the newborn body linked with the development of the pineal gland? No. It's simply the pineal gland will develop pretty quickly and almost straight away. I mean, a baby can leave the body, with the soul associated with the baby's body can leave the body at will, and they do. That's why the babies sleep quite a lot. But when they come back and they don't want to be in the body, that's when they cry. But it takes about 7 years for a soul, that's on top of the gestation period, for a soul to become fully integrated with the body and be able to animate it as if it's that's what the soul is. And it's at that point we start to become body associated, and therefore we think the body is ours. So there's no link between the two. The pineal gland will be fully functional at all times. 5, is being awake a function of a life plan, or if we can be awake out of free will? The overall life plan we've got is to become aware of who we are, aware and awake of what we are, and to detach ourselves from any low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions that can link us karmically, because karma is about low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions, with the physical. So the objective is to master being in the physical so we can navigate through it without being attracted to it or addicted to it. So a life plan can involve lots of different things associated with, we want to experience being a football star. We want to experience being an opera singer. We want to experience being a doctor or a consultant or an astrophysicist. We're going to have those experiences we want to experience, but alongside that is the desire to evolve, experience, learn, and evolve. If we have part of our life plan where we want to become more aware and awake, then we'll start to become disinterested in the physical and start to think about the metaphysical. And that's a natural thing. And that happens around the 42nd birthday. That's quite a landmark point. But we could also come into an incarnation where we have a particular role to play that is going to be there to help people to ascend their own frequential state. And so they may end up being spiritual leaders. That might be part of their life plan rather than the actual free will. The free will side will be how they achieve it, not to actually do it. Okay, number 6. Become awake, witness the observer going back to day-to-day life work, using mind becoming immersed in incarnate activities and forget wakefulness. Meditating and becoming awake again. This has become a repetitive pattern. This has become a repetitive pattern. Now, ideally, a constant state of wakefulness is difficult to maintain while in the physical world and its activities. Could you provide the source's comments on that? The yo-yoing between being fully immersed in our spirituality and being fully immersed in our physicality is something we need to master. In effect, what we need to do is create a middle road where we're in both at the same time. We're focusing on our responsibilities here. We're focusing on our capability of experiencing, learning, and evolving what we wanted to experience to help us improve that evolutionary content. But we also need to work in a way which is of service, considerate, understanding, loving, and mature at the same time, whilst also detaching ourselves and connecting at the same time. So it's a middle road. And this is where, ideally, where the Buddhist system comes into it. The yin and the yang. We have to sort of tread that fine line between yin and yang, between good and bad, between evil and wonderful. We need to sort of tread that line. And in terms of our being here and being immersed in our human form versus being immersed in our spirituality. We need to tread that line. And I've always been told to come back down to earth. I've always had people around me who could do that. And I suppose that's because I tend to be up in the frequencies more than I should be down. Yeah, more than I should be. So again, it is all about balance. And that's the way forwards. Thank you, Joe. Got good. Andrew's got some questions there. I've spoken with people who think it's a good that their desires and addictions keep them coming back to earth, life after life. They think that whatever they desire, they will eventually get in this life or the next. And this excites them very much. Yeah. Is it true that we eventually get everything we desire, for better or worse, before we move on from the incarnating and the physical? I like to think of it in a different way. We need to experience everything. We can't experience all the good stuff or all the bad stuff. It's not good, actually, that we do keep coming back. We need to master being here. We need to be able to experience or be exposed to these things which could be addictive and not be exposed to them anymore, or not be attracted to them anymore. So in effect, the whole point of it is we need to experience everything to be able to master it. So we can't just have a good life all the time. We can't just be a king all the time or a queen all the time or a successful singer all the time or a successful racing driver all the time. We have to experience being a pauper, struggling to make a living, working as a street cleaner, picking up litter from the park. We need to do all of these things. We need to experience losing our partners, having our partners for all of our lives. We need to experience all of these things to be able to evolve in a balanced way. And so the comments that those people meant are basically unbalanced. That's the best way to think of it. It's not real. There's a lot of nonsense out there in the spiritual metaphysical world. And what I would suggest is that go with what your heart tells you. If it feels like it's nonsense, it is nonsense. If it feels like it's got substance, it's got substance. But also note that some of the nonsense does have some substance in it. So you have to strip away that nonsense to get to the core of what's also there that's being used as the fishing hook, as the lure to get you into the rest of the nonsense. Because some part of it is right, but that's being used as the lure, as the bait. Okay, good. Okay, Yara's just saying congratulations on wonderful news in the book regarding being in the world, but not of it. Is our objective detachment to this end, to anchor energies and to bring about the higher frequency reality? It is. It's not. Detachment is a double-edged sword, really. It's not about walking away from something and giving up our responsibility. It's not about that. It's about detaching from how it would affect us. If we're going to remain high frequency, we need to understand why collectively we do things and individually we do things, and then understand why it's done. And in understanding why it's done, understanding that people who do this, whether they're great leaders or whether they're not, as the case may be, or collectively, we need to understand that that's being done as a function of their experiential period here on this planet, of what they're going to experience. So if we can affect them in a way that is positive by just being in their space, we don't have to do anything. We just have to be ourselves, be our good citizen, our good spiritual high frequency thinking person. And therefore we lead by example. And that's the most important thing, is leading by example. So we are here to, if you like, put the brakes on the descent of the frequencies by anchoring ourselves in the good side of what mankind can be. And mankind can be very, very good, provided it does focus properly on being mature. Okay, another question from, thank you, Yara. Another question from Andrew. You described how the soul leaves the body during a normal death. Well, what about the traumatic one? Like if somebody is decapitated or blown up in a war, does this alter the way that the soul leaves the body if the body is suddenly destroyed? This is, the traumatic energies can come with us. They can come with us into this incarnation as well. And so we have lots of different ailments or physical problems that we can have as a function of the energies that have come through from a particularly difficult or aggressive way of leaving the incarnation. But also when people suddenly die, like being blown up, or for instance, they suddenly are removed through being hanged or being electrocuted or being decapitated, for example, a lot of the time these souls end up being confused and they basically hang around the earth, not realizing that they're dead. Um, Although you could argue with those who experience the departure through being put to death by law would anticipate it, and those so therefore they wouldn't be so earthbound. But those who suddenly die, like in a plane crash, for example, where it suddenly decompresses rather than crashing through some malfunction, they would hang around the earth, not understanding that they've left yet, unless of course they're an evolved soul, in which case they can understand that they've left, and they'll be able to work it out and move forwards. That's a good question. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Next one's from Jim. In the curators, it is stated that we are in the early stages of the third evolutionary cycle, and that most of the true energetic cells that were involved in the first evolutionary cycle are involved in this one. What might be the beginning or the end of a cycle look like if we could observe it? If we could observe the end of an evolutionary cycle, it's basically the desire for all of the aspects that haven't already entered into full communion with their true energetic selves to do so, and those true energetic selves to recommune fully with Source. And I saw some of that when I was writing the end of the history of God. About, that was in 2009. I think I was writing the end of the history of God, and I saw all these different souls and true energetic selves who'd mastered the incarnation and had evolved quite quickly, going back to Source. And it's like the only thing I can suggest, it's like having a big sun and lots of stars going into lots of smaller units or planets going into the sun and becoming part of the sun, and the sun starting to become whole again. That's the only way I could describe it. It's volumes of sentience moving together and becoming part of a much larger volume of sentience. That's the only way I can describe it. Thank you. That's a good question, Jim. Next one's Andrew again. We see artificial intelligence evolving rapidly as science advances its understanding of consciousness. Is it possible that we create a device so sophisticated that the keystone of its intelligence, not really the nuts and bolts of the thing itself, but actual higher consciousness or entities being able to channel through said devices? Let me start that again. Is it possible that we create a device so sophisticated that the keystone of its intelligence, not really the nuts and bolts of the thing itself, but actual higher consciousness or entity being able to channel through said devices? In the the book on the I do see, and there are civilizations that are machine based that have developed to their own levels of highly complicated and highly diverse intelligence, equal to sentience, but they won't have and they don't have a soul. They won't have an aspect because they're not created or they're not evolved through the natural evolution of energy. A soul or an aspect such as us, we could integrate with a mechanical vehicle. I mean, this is a biomechanical vehicle with other frequencies that help create it and support it that we just can't see. So we could interact with such a physical vehicle. For example, if we chose to, we could interact with an aeroplane and a motor car. If we wanted to, we could animate it, but we don't because it doesn't benefit us. It's not complicated enough. But a body type, for instance, that has got the capacity to allow sentience to truly interact with it, we could do. So we could create a robot, for example, or a vehicle that could house sentience, should we decide to incarnate into it or associate ourselves with it. But it wouldn't be as, shall we say, efficient at accruing evolution as these bodies are, for example. And the sentience associated that could eventually evolve through machine intelligence won't move beyond the infrastructure that created it, so to speak. It might become part of the physical world, but it wouldn't, or the physical universe, in fact, but it wouldn't be able to go beyond the physical universe. Okay, so that's another good question. Yara's just saying we've got 5 new questions, and I don't know if I'm going to finish them before the end. And we've got 9 minutes left. So if I don't finish the question, don't worry. I'll do them at the end, and I'll add them on the recording. But they're good questions. I'm really pleased, actually. Yara says, I've just reached the suicide chapter on the exquisite and dialogues when Aaron Bushnell performed his significant sacrifice. What is the classification? Pre-decided, a juncture. Surely the downstream consequences of alchemy, freedom, saving lines, waking up, etc., is better than a life lost, or even lied, bringing about death and destruction to others. Yes, the suicide is never an option. It's always generally created through the inability to rationalize what's happening from a logical perspective, because sometimes we need to move into logic to be able to move forward, but sometimes logic is not so logical as well, and therefore people think that the logical way out of the situation is to end or terminate the incarnation. Incarnations that end in suicide aren't part of a termination juncture. 99.99% recurring to the millionth odd degree. That is true. I have known of one, and Dolores Cannon knew of one, where the soul wanted to leave the body. There was no other option. There was no chance of a walk-in. There was no chance of leaving through any accident or illness, etc., etc., etc. So they were allowed to leave through suicide. Those are the only 2 I know. One was the child of somebody I know. I'm not going to name names. And one was somebody that Dolores Cannon established the information through one of her hypnosis sessions. So it's definitely not the way forwards. It's definitely not better a life lost. There's always a way to work out something. It's just that we need to find those individuals to help us. Okay, so good question. I'd encourage you all to read that chapter on suicide from the End Dialogues. If I get a chance, I'll see if I can extract it. It might be too big to extract. So if anybody's interested, then I think the book is there. You can buy it on Kindle. It's quite cheap. It's pretty good. Next question is from Daniel. Okay. The experience on this planet is very difficult. It seems we're on the verge of succeeding and failing at any one time. Being on the edge of succeeding and failing is very motivational. This small group of a holding company is very, very helpful. That's us. Are there any other places in the multiverse that are similar or close to the value of the experiences we have on Earth? That links in with what Ulla said about are there any other entities who are experiencing individualized free will? And say yes, there's one group like us per frequential level above the third. So yes, there are. But there's lots of civilizations that don't have individualized free will, that do go through similar difficulties from a collective perspective, or maybe they've got a level of individualized free will which isn't total individualized free will, but individualized free will to support the collective. So they're autonomous within certain constraints. And those, I'm picking up now that those particular civilizations would and can and do experience certain levels of difficulty as well as a result of having to become mature, basically. Next question is from Andrew. So thank you, Daniel. Next question from Andrew. My favorite Eastern teacher, Ram Dass, would sometimes say that suffering is grace. What do you think about this? We're all suffering now. Basically, in coming to the earth, we experience a significant drop in our communicative and functional bandwidth and capability. So in suffering, we evolve. We come here to experience difficulty in the environment, because working here is extremely hard work. It is like wading through solid concrete in reality. There's a difference compared to what we are. Suffering in silence is not grace. If we need help if we are suffering, we need to have help. Working for the benefit of source is working in the grace of God, and doing the best you can for other people is working in grace. I wouldn't say suffering for the sake of suffering is grace. I think that's probably the wrong way to think of it. So the fact that we are suffering in being here helping others, or we suffer something to help somebody else, and the result is that they come out of suffering. That's probably the better interpretation of it. Okay. Next question, Daniel. When do we know that helping our children, our friends, enables them rather than help them? So I'll start again. When do we know that helping our children or friends enables them rather than help them move ahead? What is a good way to tell them that we should be helping and being of service to another person versus enabling them? The best way is showing them, is just helping your neighbor. From the very point of if you have a child, they're programmed. From the very point that they come into this environment and they're born, they're programmed. If you can show how to live by being the good example all the time, from the very point at which they start to be programmed, thinking, behaving, and acting in the best way, in the service-based way, they will become that. They won't be totally programmed to the way you are, because they've got their own sentience and therefore their own personality associated with it. But they will become better than if they're just left to run riot and go wild. You can show them and teach them how to think, behave, and act in a law-abiding, caring, mature, good citizen-based way, they will end up like that. Okay. Next question. If we have many parallel lives, is it the same as having many parallel existences, such as embodiments? If we have 300 parallel lives, is it the same as having 300 embodiments on this earth? Yes, basically. The parallel lives happen concurrently. So, in effect, with the choices I've made today, there's probably about 4 or 5 versions of me out there in different environments that are existing in slightly different ways, that creates the potential for an increased level of evolutionary content. So basically, yes, event space faithfully creates us energetically and physically. Okay. So this is a question from Yara. Okay, it's running out of time, so I'll see if I can get through it. And the question is there any way we can help those earthbound souls, considering all that's happening now? The percentage of children amongst them and their attachment to their still suffering loved ones alive. From our perspective, it's quite difficult because we need to communicate with them. So the only way we can do that is to meditate on them, and meditate on them saying that it's okay for them to leave, it's okay for them to go to where they normally exist within the frequency in the subdimensional component of the full dimension that their true energetic self lives. So if we want to meditate on where we feel there might be souls who are earthbound, who are still stuck here, bearing in mind that their guide and helpers will be helping them as well, we can simply feel where, if there's any close to us, or if we know of somebody who's departed quickly, for example, for instance, a friend or a relative or a loved one, or a friend's parents or something, or somebody that we know at a distance, we can meditate on them and send them love and reassurance that they've moved on, their body is demised, they are still in existence because they've forgotten that they are in existence beyond the association with the physical body, and just send them love and say, go with your guide and helpers. They're there to help you move onwards and help you to become reassociated with who and what you are. And that's, if you like, debrief them. And that's the best thing for you. Just send them love and just meditate on them and repeat a mantra. Let them know that they'll be fine. Their children or their wife or their husband or their parents or their friends will be fine. They may not understand, but they will also at some point be back in the energetic with you, and just give them the reassurance. Just meditate on sending them the reassurance, and that will help them. Continuing from this, Yara is saying, are entities in the life review process aware they're in this process? Yes. Once we've moved beyond being earthbound or being in limbo or creating an environment around us that we do because we don't realize that we've died, but we also we're not earthbound, and our guide and helpers have moved us from it, from it and away from it. We do in fact understand who and what we are, and the life review process is done with total cognition. And there's an additional part to this question. He said, and she says, I mean, those who died in war and are still earthbound. If they're still earthbound, then they're not in the life review process. They have to have moved beyond being associated with the earth, or beyond being in limbo, or beyond being in a self-created environment or reality before they can go through the life review process. Excellent questions. Thank you very, very much for you all. And I'm looking forward to working with you all in March. So namaste to you all. Welcome to the meditation side of this World Satsanga. What we're going to do now is a meditation to help you remove your programming, remove your current belief system, and allow you to start to consider that just because you can't see, smell, feel, taste, or touch something, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This will allow you to raise up the frequencies and therefore become more connected, and therefore start to understand the greater reality and the truth that surrounds us, but is currently invisible because of our low frequency, and is therefore being classified as non-existent by our authority figures. So just close your eyes. If you're sitting in a straight-backed chair with your feet flat on the ground, with your spine straight, your neck in alignment with your spine, your hands palm uppermost on your upper thighs, and your closed eye vision gently focused on the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. If you're sitting cross-legged or in one of the lotus-based postures, make sure that your coccyx is interfacing with the ground and that your back is straight and you're not crouched over. And again, you put your hands palm uppermost on the interface of the upper thighs with the lower body. Again, make sure that your eyes are closed and gently focused on the origin of the spiritual or the third eye. And I want you to realize that information based on the physical that's justifiable by the physical is limited to the physical. Just because the physical is low frequency, it doesn't actually mean that it is a limited environment. It's just our interaction with it that is limited. Those individuals who do great things, they have great inventions, do great levels of leadership, they do great levels of experimentation or great levels of interaction with the environment, don't consider limitation as being part of their vocabulary. They are unlimited. They see a way around everything. They can work around that which is potentially difficult by creating the possibility of making it easy or surmountable. So just relax and consider that everything is possible. And it is possible, and we do everything without limitation when we're in the energetic. It's just that here we have to do everything like wading through solid concrete. That's what it feels like when we're here. I want you to think of an example. Doesn't have to be a complicated example, where you were told that you couldn't do something, that it was too difficult, it was impossible. You didn't have the experience, you didn't have the know-how, you didn't have the tools around you, you didn't have the people to help you around you. We're going to use this as a physical example of how you may have found something insurmountable and then worked around it and made it surmountable, removing your limitation. It may have been something you had to do at college or school or at work or something on holiday, or maybe you were traveling somewhere and there was a roadblock and you had to get to a location on time and you found a way around it. Consider the example you've got as being something which is physical and you found a solution. Think about that experience. What did you do? Were you working with some wood, for example, and didn't have the right tool to do what you needed to do? So you used another tool to do the same thing, but in a slightly different way? Did you find a route around a blocked road or a flooded street? Did you find a way through an airport when you were late for your departure? Did you work out a difficult mathematical equation that you previously had no idea how it functioned? How did you do that? Did you ask people to help you? Did you ask them to teach you? Did you show your example and then learn from that example and they showed you other ways of doing the same thing? Did you have a problem in the house, for example, a burst pipe, and learn how to repair the pipe? You've never done it before. And everybody around you was saying you've got to bring in a plumber. Think of something that you were told was impossible or you couldn't do because you weren't able, knowledgeable enough, or good enough to do. And you still did it. You bit the bullet, so to speak. You took the bull by the horns, so to speak. Think of the miracles in history. Jesus walking on water, manifesting thousands upon thousands of loaves and fishes for a starving congregation, turning water into wine, healing people from a distance he's never seen before, making the blind see. What about the Buddha? Understanding beingness, connecting with the greater reality through meditation, through detaching, through renouncing the physical whilst still being in the physical, removing limitation, deciding not to be limited, not to agree, and therefore not believe the authority figures around us that say you can't do this, you can't do that. This doesn't mean you have to break the law. It means you have to break the law of programmed limitation within you. Become independent, experiment, do more, do better, do higher frequency. Meditate, meditate, meditate. and you'll be rewarded by connectivity and knowledge associated with the three main fundamental higher levels of communication: spiritual vision, clairvoyance; spiritual hearing, clairaudience; spiritual knowingness, clairsentience; cosmic consciousness, intuition. Recognize those things that you've done that people said were impossible. Even if you didn't do them all, even if you didn't do all of it, you went halfway and you started to see the fact that you could do it given time. Sometimes we need to acclimatize ourselves with a higher frequency, or acclimatize ourselves with a different level of education to allow us to be able to recognize that we can do more than we currently can right now. Feel the freedom associated with not accepting the normal limitations that people live their whole lives with. Think of these people who are blind, who climb mountains, who have lost legs in wars or through birth, and they still climb mountains. They still go swimming. They still go scuba diving. They still go parachute jumping. They aren't limited in their thought processes. So why should you be? Move beyond the physical and go into the metaphysical. Meditate, meditate, meditate. And in doing so, remove the physical limitations, the thought processes that creates the doubt, the I can't do this because, and turns it into I can do this because instead. Absorb these times when you've overcome adversity, you've overcome your own limitation, and recognize that you can continue to do this on a regular daily basis. And in doing so, you raise your frequencies, building your confidence in connecting with the higher frequencies associated with the physical universe. Above those are the gross physical in the multiverse, and you become connected. The limitation of any sort disappears. And just meditate, stay still, absorb our ability to be unlimited, to know rather than believe that we are unlimited, to reject that which limits us, and to be unlimited, to be limitless. Okay, so fully revitalized with knowledge that you are limitless. Do you have no limitations? You can slowly come back into the room, slowly open your eyes, and just feel how high frequency you are in comparison to what you were before you started this meditation, or even before you started listening to this satsanga with the lecture. It's been wonderful being able to share this with you. I'm delighted to be able to work with you again in next month's satsanga in March. So God's love to you all, and Namaste.
Did you see the aliens in Crete?